Welcome to episode 11 of In the Car. And also, this is the first video in which I will try to merge my commentary here with an actual blog post that goes into more detail. I guess, maybe that's it. Maybe that's how I was going to... Per the last video, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do that. But, I thought that maybe the video would do the heavy lifting and then the blog post would be just ancillary to that. But I'm thinking now that this video really is kind of a real-time discussion about it, and the blog post should actually be the more eloquent, let's put it that way, more eloquent, more prose-worthy, representation of the thoughts, because I'm sure that I'm going to miss stuff here talking about it in real time, and it'll be up to the blog post to kind of, collect the rest of the stuff in a more coherent manner. So, episode 11, I'm going to talk to you about stuff we're never going to see in MMOs. Because if you're as old as I am, or older, and you've been playing online games for, quite a while, you'll remember, of course, that online gaming didn't start with World of Warcraft, or specifically MMOs didn't start with World of Warcraft. The distinction, I suppose, goes all the way back to when we had to use BBS, bulletin board systems. We'd connect the modem direct to our PC, and we'd have to connect it to the phone line, dial up a specific number, and everything would be, menus and ASCII art. And during that time, I used to play, a game like Trade Wars, which was all, menu-driven and everything. So, those were asynchronous multiplayer, which means that you'd run into another player, but, you wouldn't take you would take your actions, and they'd be kind of like, AI-controlled, sort of. So they would retaliate, but not necessarily attack you. You could just pass them by. So it didn't matter whether they were online or offline at the time, you still got to deal with them in an asynchronous manner. And then, of course, we got other things. There were other things going on at the time, like MUDs, which were the true precursors of modern MMOs. And then we started getting other, more graphical games. We had the games that you'd get through CompuServe and AOL. And then you started getting standalone games like, Meridian 59, Ultima Online, Asheron's Call. There's a third one there. There's three of them that I keep remembering, all kind of in the same bucket. Crap, I forget what it is. I don't believe it. Anyway, if you can remember that far back, or if you actually spend time, knowing about MMOs, its history, and their ilk outside of actually, reading guides about how to specifically play a specific game, then the name Raph Koster will ring a bell. He worked on Ultima Online, Star Wars Galaxies, and other games. He built on that MetaPlace project, which was really cool because it would allow people to, essentially make their own games. You could script it using Lua, and it was a great training resource for me personally, because it worked a lot like the way Unity works. So, it's because of MetaPlace that I was able to kind of understand Unity, and at which point I proceeded to never finish a project. But, Raph Koster's been posting on his blog some, behind-the-scenes stories about Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies was the first online Star Wars game that was unceremoniously shut down to make way for Star Wars: The Old Republic. So the conventional wisdom goes. Star Wars Galaxies, and very much like UO before it, were amazing games. At the time, they were amazing simply because no one had done games like this before. They weren't simply just translations of Dungeons and Dragons, with graphics. They actually went out of their way to bring mind-blowing systems into this new, growing field of what we know today as MMOs. Ultima Online, of course, has got an isometric look to it, but even at the time when it came out, it was still kind of it was interesting. It, of course, followed from the Ultima series, which through necessity was top down, quote unquote. It was 2D, but it looked top down, and then eventually broke into first person and isometric in Ultima Online. Ultima Online had a lot of features such as housing that you could put basically anywhere. It had in-depth crafting. It had a skill system that worked by using or not using, the skills that the actions that those skills governed. Like if you wanted to learn how to use a sword, you basically just swung a sword. If you wanted to learn how to bake bread, you would bake bread. You'd have to suffer through a lot of failures on each, but eventually over time you would gain skill just by doing it. That was fantastic. Ultima Online basically didn't have any quests or anything like that. It was an ultra sandbox before there was even a theme park, so we didn't even know what the hell we were looking at. We just knew it as Ultima Online. Then when Star Wars Galaxies came out, of course everybody was like, woohoo, Star Wars! Which was fantastic. And, people have really, really deep feelings about Star Wars Galaxies. And saying that, we all have to understand that everybody has their own opinions, and all of those opinions are valid. So if anybody disagrees with anything I'm about to say, that's fine. This is my opinion only. Okay? Share your reminiscence, but, don't crap on anybody else's opinions of this, right? Because I loved Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies was the first game where I don't think I ever killed anything. Not true, I actually did, but my primary role was as a crafter. And that made me stupidly happy. My brother and I set up a little two-person operation where we would go out. We were on, where were we? Corellia. We were on Corellia. And we would go out into the land and survey for minerals. And we would throw down the harvesters. And we would collect the materials. And we worked our asses off to gain, top-tier crafting skills. Crafting in that game was fantastic because you could experiment on items to make them better, and if you screwed up, you made them worse, and everything that you made was compiled into the final item. So to make a blaster, you had to make the grip and the body and the barrel, and everything that you made got stamped with your name. So if someone bought your weapons because they were the best weapons that they could find, stats-wise, they would know who made those, and they could come looking for you because, again, you could set up housing pretty much anywhere you wanted out in the wilderness, and you could turn that house into a shop. You could hire NPCs to sell stuff for you in your absence, and it was, that was massive. That was huge. It was a game inside of a game inside of a game. You didn't have to just show up and kill stuff. And that's kind of what Raph Koster's talking about in his blog and his series of posts, detailing this kind of post-mortem about Star Wars Galaxies in several parts. And, the real kicker, though, is that reading these posts, it's fantastic for any armchair, theologian who thinks they know how game development operates, to go and read these and to realize what kind of fucked up ecosystem these things are actually developed in. Stuff that looks like it works fine to us maybe, a hacked disaster area, which didn't actually conform to the original design documents and really frustrated the development team. Or something that, didn't look like it was working properly, was actually a really complicated and well-integrated system. You never know what goes on behind the scenes just by looking at the finished product. So, these blog posts have been fantastic. If it was a behind-the-scenes look at something like, Shadowbane. Shadowbane? Is that it? I never played Shadowbane. I never played that game. I've tried it, but I never really played it. The insight would still be valuable, but I wouldn't have this personal kind of connection to it, like I did reading these posts about Star Wars Galaxies. And it's been so long since I played Star Wars Galaxies before it shut down that a lot of the things that Raph Koster is talking about, I totally forgot. So reading these things, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh my God, I remember that. So, not only is it nostalgic, but it's also kind of sad. When he talks about how combat was basically broken because, again, these were the days before, people could write, netcode combat systems in their sleep. They had to basically suss all this stuff out for the first time. They had to try new things because, the way another game did it didn't seem to work for this particular game, so they had to come up with a totally new direction. And because the MMO genre wasn't the let's chase WoW environment that it ended up being, the companies weren't really that excited about throwing resources at these games. So apparently, I guess Star Wars Galaxies ran on some really crappy-ass hardware that just simply didn't allow them to do some of the wonderful things that they actually wanted to do. And it's especially when I read admissions like that I just hang my head and realize that we're pretty much fucked here in, the year of our Lord 2015, because even though now MMOs are, huge money makers for companies that can, pull off a really, really high profile game, and hopefully are money makers for the niche products, out there, we still will never see some of these awesome ideas in a new MMO. The technology now is advanced where it could probably handle some of the things that Koster talks about in these posts, but they're still too unproven. And they're only unproven not because nobody tried them. They tried to do it in Star Wars Galaxies, but the technical limitations held them back, bureaucracy held them back, and for a risk-averse genre, the reason why they didn't work is irrelevant. They simply just didn't work. Or, hey, didn't you want to do this in previous game? Yes, I did. Why didn't you? Well, this, that, so it didn't work. Well, no, but okay, so we're not going to do it. I mean, it's some things trickle out here and there. One of the things that Koster talks about in the most recent post was how they wanted to allow musicians to write their own music. Turns out that was actually nixed because of a stupid-ass problem where they went to the recording industry, because I guess LucasArts and EA were kind of was it EA? I think EA did Star Wars Galaxies, where they did they were concerned about copyright issues, that someone could essentially bang out Stairway to Heaven like they do in Lord of the Rings Online, which would cause all manner of copyright problems. So that got shot down. Then there was a whole bunch of other things that got shut down, for strange reasons. But these things they trickled out in other forms into other games, but they're disparate pieces. It's a diaspora of kick-ass ideas, which means that if you want this, you got to go play that game. If you want that, you got to go play another game. You're never going to get all of this stuff into one modern uber planet-destroying MMO, right? And granted, a lot of these cool things that I was reading about and either remembering or wishing I had, not all of those things are going to appeal to the modern MMO enthusiast, right? I mean, years and years of chasing after World of Warcraft have distilled this genre into nothing but games about gaining loot and achievements, right? UO and Star Wars Galaxies were very much living ecosystems. And I think that's why people love them so much, because they allowed people to play the game when they wanted to, but more importantly, to socialize, to get together. And, using tools that the game provided. And games just don't do that anymore. Now it's all about chasing loots and achievements, and I think it's really sad that we're probably never going to see a lot of those things that either were in Star Wars Galaxies or that they really wanted to do but couldn't because it was a product of the time.